Good afternoon. We have 2 o'clock, so we're going to begin the webinar. I want to thank you all for joining us. This is Victoria Beal with the Ohio LTAP Center, and we're very pleased this afternoon to be able to host one of our federal partners, Jill Stark, who's with the FHWA Office of Planning, and she will be presenting on value capture. But before Jill gets started, just a couple of housekeeping items. First off, we are attempting to record the webinar, and if we are successful, we'll send a link out to everyone. The webinar recordings aren't always successful, though, so it's good that you're on here, and we're happy to have you. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the webinar using the chat pod on the lower left-hand side of your screen. If you don't currently see the chat pod, which should say conversation at the top and have today's date below it, look for a circle with a thought bubble in the middle and click on that, and then hopefully the conversation panel will open for you. We ask you to submit questions this way while Jill's presenting so we don't have any interruptions from background noise. However, when we get to the end of the webinar, I will unmute everyone to ask audio questions. During the webinar, if you put questions in the chat pod, I'll read those off to Jill so she can provide you a response. And I believe that is all the housekeeping items I have. So, Jill, are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go.
All right,
So I can only see my screen, so I probably won't be able to see the chat questions during the presentation, but Victoria, you feel free to interrupt if you feel like it's a timely question.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm pretty flexible with that. And so with that, I'll go ahead and get started on value capture. So value capture is one of the Everyday Counts 5 initiatives. And if you don't know what Everyday Counts is, it's something that our Federal Highway Administrator, he or she will set sort of, some of the 5 or 6 major initiatives that are really coming up through the agency and things that, they want to provide extra funding to back those initiatives because they've been requests from the states. So we do presentations, we'll do peer exchanges, we'll do technical assistance, all kinds of different things, and I'll go into a little bit of that later. But with that, let's just go into an overview of what we're going to talk about today, give you just a general concept of what value capture is, and also more about this Everyday Counts initiative. I'll go into the mechanisms, which are the 7 techniques, and those examples. Anytime I could find an Ohio example, I include it, but then I will also give a local example for each of those techniques. Then I'll go into just kind of a basic over the steps to a successful implementation, and then funding opportunities. So as you see here, this is a pictorial representation that shows how different entities can contribute to transportation investments. And value capture is really a toolbox of 7 techniques to recover a portion of increased property value created as a result of public infrastructure investment. So we use this also as an innovative finance strategy to accelerate project delivery. And this, in short, as quickly reviewed, is part of a mixed funding stream. It accelerates project delivery. It's meant to be equitable so that all people, if there's a fee or a tax, that all people are kind of equitably, I guess, I wouldn't say challenge, but so there's an equitable contribution. And then going into some of those untapped funding sources. So we have this ever-growing clearinghouse. We're working on some frequently asked questions right now. We're updating all of our information, our implementation plan, everything with some infographics that just kind of give more clarity to the concept, because really value capture is a complex set of these techniques for funding strategies. So here are just a few of our web pages, and this is where everything is held. And you will also find examples for all of the techniques I'm talking about today. Now, I don't need to go into funding shortages too much because we all feel that. You know, we have these end of useful life cycles in our transportation projects. We have deferred maintenance, and that leads to a maintenance backlog. The last time the federal gas tax was raised was 1993, and so by now we have a 40% decrease in purchasing power. So increased fuel efficiency and reduced growth in VMT. Now we're having even fewer contributions to the fuel tax because of that. And we're also needing to look at smart infrastructure investment needs.
Jill,
so
it looks like we lost your presentation there.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Oh, no.
I don't know why, but if you want to go ahead and reshare.
Okay.
And if not, I do have the version you sent me, so I can always load it up, but I'd prefer to let you try to load it first.
Oh, gosh. Technical savvy, not my thing.
It's all right.
Okay.
Everybody who's on this webinar, I'm certain, has had a moment or two where they've had, technical difficulties with their computers. So I'm certain that they empathize with you.
Do you see my desktop now?
No, I see something that says feel free to start sharing. So I tell you what I'm going to do. Let me try to just load up the version that you had sent me.
Okay.
And then I will be able to share that with everybody.
Oh, I apologize, everyone.
Oh, you're fine.
Okay, here. Now it's letting me try this again.
Oh, yeah, it's back up now. Okay, good.
Is it back up?
It is.
Okay.
But I've got the other one
pause
in the background in case we need it. So, all right.
All right. Well, thanks for letting me know, and we'll go back on track.
Sure.
So a few of these innovative financing techniques that we have, a lot of these you're probably familiar with. You've got the TIF, the road rehabilitation, and improvement financing. We have private activity bonds, which are, tax exempt. State infrastructure banks, which are it's a revolving fund that offers direct loans or credit. Section 129 loans are really tolls, excise taxes, etc. There's a big list under that. And then we also have leases. Now this one I include I'm going to go into examples of each of these categories. So these developer contributions, special assessments, but I wanted you to have a chart because some of my examples, like under incremental growth, I might show you a tax incremental finance, but I might not have a local example of a tax allocation district. That doesn't mean that there aren't large municipalities that have done this or, maybe small local examples or county examples that I'm just not aware of. But I want you to know that there are these different, techniques available. So with that, I'm going to go into developer contribution. Now, these are impact fees and negotiated exactions. A one-time fee assessed on new development, and this is intended to pay the cost of expanding and extending public services resulting from new development. This is assessed at the time a building permit is issued, and they're paid prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. Now, I have an Ohio example of this, and this is in Hamilton, Ohio. Now, this isn't a small or local example. It is a population of 62,000, but I did want to give as many Ohio examples as I could. This is a public-private partnership with the City of Hamilton, the Hamilton Community Foundation, and local lending institutions. And this really provides, this core fund engages in 3 different activities. It provides gap financing for large development projects, purchases and repurposes key underutilized commercial properties, and acquires historic residential properties and works with potential homeowners to renovate and occupy the homes. So this is a really unique and interesting project, and I wanted you to know some different things going on in your great state of Ohio. So I do have a local example, and this is Bozeman, Montana. The area is a population 46,000, but I think Bozeman itself has a smaller population. And this is developmental impact fees, which are imposed upon private land developers to fund additional service capacity required by the development. So recoupment, past improvements, new development is paying for its share of the useful life and remaining capacity of facilities already built. So new development is kind of contributing to some of those already institutionalized facilities. And then there's incremental expansion, which is concurrent improvements, and that's, any kind of expansion to the facility that's going on at the time of the development. And then we have plan-based fees for future improvements. So it's looking at what are the needs of this development going to bring to the facilities, and those fees will contribute to those future needs as well. Our next one is special assessments. And this is special assessment districts, business improvement districts, sales tax districts, and land value taxes. Special assessments involve assessing incremental property taxes on land and often the buildings on that land that are deriving direct benefits due to a transportation improvement. The tax levied typically represents a portion of the estimated benefit to the properties located with a designated zone in close proximity to the improvement. Special assessments, which are known as benefit assessments or special taxes, are one of the most prominent forms of value capture in the United States. In addition to transportation improvements, special assessments may be used in other sectors, including waste and water. So we have this Lake Shannon Road improvement in the Tyrone Township of Michigan, and this is a special assessment district. This population is 10,447, and what this requires is a petition for repaving roads in exchange for a 10-year tax assessment. The assessment will be paid in 10 annual installments starting in 2018. The total cost was about $1.3 million in special assessment bonds. And down here you have a very small map of the improvements, but I'm also giving you, I think in the PDF you've got sources, so I just had to look up Lake Shannon Association, and then I found that information there. Our third technique is fees. And fees really just refers to transportation utility fees. So if you think about getting your utility bill, it would be like having a fee for, for driving 4 days a week in town kind of thing. So this applies to all residents and businesses. It's paid by property occupants rather than by property owners. So if you have rental facilities, it would be paid by the renter, not necessarily the rental owner, based on the estimated number of roadway trips generated by a property, and fees are typically added to the city utility bill. The example I have here is Mission, Kansas, and Mission, Kansas is right outside of Kansas City. This population is 9,409 people. Their transportation, so theirs is a user fee obtained through property tax bills. Okay, so it's including tax-exempt properties, and that's one thing that, that this example you might take note of. And so it's calculated by estimating the average number and intensity, type, size of use. So single-family homes pay a flat fee of $72 per year. Other property types pay by land use type. 91% of all multi-residential or tenant spaces pay less than $100 per year. 60% of all commercial spaces pay less than $1,000 per year. Now, some of the 40% that are paying more might be a major business where it's it's an economic center where a lot of people are making trips to that area. So we have kind of an example of, and this was on their Facebook page, but this was helping to create this sunken garden restoration. They've used their utility fees in renovating their streets, Oakwood Road, Overhill Road, parks and facilities, as you see here, the Sunken Garden Park, and then also spot curb replacement program. And this is to meet the ADA requirements for upgrading sidewalks. They've used that money to go towards that. And then I had another local, it's not really a local example, obviously. It's Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And even though it is an urban example, it does show the scheduling of utility fees. And I kind of wanted to show you just, how another source took that and streamlined their scheduling for that. And it was, for Milwaukee, it's applied again annually. Most commonly applied to roads, but they could use it for other things like water and sewer, and generally for maintenance rather than capital projects. Okay, so now we have incremental growth. Now this is tax incremental finance, transportation reinvestment zones, or tax allocation districts. And again, you have that big chart which will tell you all the different terms that I'm, speaking of right now. So this is within a defined geographic area or zone, authorized by 49 state statutes and the District of Columbia. So pretty much every state can do this, and offers a source of long-term revenues and generates significant gap financing. It's a flexible, powerful tool to foster high-quality development and redevelopment. So in the state of Ohio, and this is where I'm going to go to this, this website because I really like this. So I pulled this up so we can go to the Ohio Development Services Agency. So it's development.ohio.gov, and then there's this OTEI search. So automatically my eye goes to Defiance County. I don't know what that means, but let's pull that up, and it will show us some of the tax incentives and the projects that are associated with that. So here's the local jurisdiction. We've got this Mark Township. We've got Farmer Township, McGavitt Road, and we've got Brenninger Road and Spiker Contracting. So this is a really neat tool that I'm actually I'm going to be showing another, let's go Cuyahoga, just to show one more. And here you see a lot of projects going in Cuyahoga County, and I hope I'm saying that right. But anyway, you can start to see all the projects going on. And I think, especially for Ohio, it gives you a really great resource for reaching out to someone who might have a similar project that you would want to implement. And you can you can start up your own peer exchange with that. And I think that is extremely helpful. So, tax increment financing. It's an economic development mechanism available to local governments to finance public infrastructure improvements and, in certain circumstances, residential rehabilitation. And in the first example, I kind of showed, what that residential rehabilitation could look like. So definitely check out that Ohio tool because I'm going to be sharing that nationally. I think that's a really great tool. And then we also have, I wanted to show another example, and this is in Leominster, Massachusetts, population 41,000. This is, let's see, this is an 8-year term agreement. And I like what they do with this sort of front-loading sliding scale of exemptions. So year 1, you're paying 100% of the increment, and it goes down significantly so that by year 8, you're paying 0. But it does kind of require an investment in that area for really at least, 5 or 6 years, if not longer. So this additional 54,000 square feet of, and this was applied to not a manufacturer, but it was a manufacturer's facility. And really the TIF agreement, it had this 8-year term provided for a front-loading scale. So Star Container invested approximately $6.2 million into the facility and equipment. The TIF provided for the creation of 25 new full-time manufacturing and managerial jobs. 150 existing jobs were retained by ensuring the facility stayed at the existing site. At the end of this TIF period, the city will gain approximately $23,000 annually in additional property taxes. Star Container is located in the state-designated economic target area of northern Worcester County. Therefore, Star Container can seek other state economic incentives in addition to the TIF agreement with the city. Oh, goodness. Okay. Sorry, I just saw a little pop-up on my screen. So Leominster uses TIF agreements only for manufacturing businesses. So if you're looking at doing something like that, this might be a good municipality to reach out to. And I always encourage this kind of peer exchange where you contact those municipalities directly, because I think they can give you the good, the bad, and the ugly of the experience that they've gone through. And I think it's always really important to note these things because, there might be hiccups that they've gone through that you can avoid by just, having that sort of lessons learned. Okay, I'm keeping an eye on my time because I really don't want to go over. I want to provide lots of time for questions.
You're doing a great job on the time, and we haven't had any questions come in the chat pod yet, but I just wanted to take a moment to remind folks that if they do have questions, please enter them in the chat pod on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. If you aren't seeing a chat pod, look for a circle with a thought bubble in it and click on that, and it should open your chat pod up for you. Thanks.
And if you're like me and not technically savvy, you can wait until the end when we unmute the lines and you can ask questions then. So that's fine as well. So on to our next technique, which is joint development. Now these are at grade, below grade, or above grade rights. And above grade rights would be like air rights. This involves a partnership between a public entity and a private developer to develop certain infrastructure assets. This is a sale or lease of development rights over a transit station or highway, and it plays a key role in some urban projects. Now, I have this is kind of a cool example, but a very terrible map is coming up. I apologize for it was so much better on my small screen, but when I see this, it's not very clear. So this is the town of Madison, Alabama. The population is 48,000. They're all under the threshold of an MPO. Some are, bigger municipalities than others. This is pretty, I think this is outside of Montgomery, but they used a combination of joint development, negotiated exactions, and impact fees. This is a mixed land use development, and it was developed in many phases. So the first phase will include a 100-acre site at the corner of I-565 and Ziert Road, and 55 acres where the old Intergraph buildings were torn down. So the crews will break ground, I think it's coming up this fall. And so the first phase is going to also include luxury apartments, The first 280 units will operate in a 4-story facility with elevators and high-end amenities and all this wonderful stuff. So the sixth technique that we have are concessions. And concessions really is just applying to asset recycling. And that's a long-term lease of existing highway facilities. So think of a toll facility, something like that. And then the use of the lease revenues to pay for other highway improvement needs. So the U.S. experience with infrastructure asset recycling is limited, and sometimes we kind of have to look outside our country to get better examples. So we don't have too many examples here, but we do have one in Indiana, and this is the Indiana Toll Road. And we do have a couple of other examples, which I think are in Atlanta, but I don't necessarily, if we're talking about local examples or statewide examples, I don't necessarily put in the Atlanta example because it's just such a massive concept that when people look at it, it's a huge project. It takes a big part of the city, and it's kind of hard to break down all the different value capture techniques that they're implementing in that project. But if you do want to look at that, it really is an excellent example, and you can find that on that link below. So the Indiana Toll Road, $3.8 billion, 75-year agreement. So it received that $3.8 billion up front, which funded 10 transportation plans and retained all public employees. So that's funding quite a bit up front, and it's really a great technique if you can do this, because what you're doing is you're getting that money up front and you're funding those needs before the cost goes up significantly. So you can do that kind of while it's still manageable, and you're really creating, you're really meeting a significant gap in that funding. And then finally, our last is advertising. And advertising can also refer to naming rights. Advertising revenue can be derived by selling space on transportation facility assets. For example, inside transit vehicles, transit stations or bus stops, billboards along highways. Most transit agencies currently have advertising programs that generate revenue for their systems. The revenue from transit advertising as a percent of the operating budget is very small, though, but the total dollars are significant. The 4 largest transit agencies in the U.S., not including New York, average $6.1 million a year. So it can be a very small thing with a very big reward. And if you think about it in this way, we used to just have, the Orange Bowl or the Rose Bowl, but now you have the Tostito Bowl, and you have those sort of advertising rights, and I think here we have the Verizon Center. Well, those advertising rights, that's going back to the city. So this is that same sort of concept. So the only example that I currently have that's not a major TMA or large municipality is really in the state of Virginia. So this is taking effect July 1st of this year, and this is due to, I think, the HB 20 bill, that was the House bill that was passed in state legislation. So the anticipated revenue will generate $27 million in the first 5 years and $273 million in 20 years. And all of that will go to road repairs. The functional classification determines the cost. So when you have urban interstates, it's going to cost you $200,000 to advertise. Rural interstates, $75,000. Primary roads, $20,000 to $50,000, and secondary roads, $5,000 to $17,000. Now, off the top of my head, I do not know how many urban interstate miles, rural interstate, et cetera, in Virginia, but if you do want to follow up with me later and ask that, I'm happy to provide that information. So our summary on value capture before I go into the implementation is really that this is, a set of very powerful funding tools that can help address funding gaps, and the U.S. DOT highly supports this initiative. It can be part of the mix of funding sources for transportation improvement solutions, can accelerate project delivery, enhance safety, and save time and money, when it's done well. And not all techniques are applicable for all contexts. Some help spur economic development while others work better in growing areas. And so that's the thing. We're providing lots of techniques, and we're also going out and doing these peer exchanges and technical assistance and workshops, whenever requested, because there are a lot of partners out there that can really help you go through the implementation process and how it worked best for them. And then by that, you determine what's going to work best for you. So when I go into these steps, this is a very, very general overview of the capital improvement program. And this is really where these workshops are going to come in handy. Because in the workshops, we will go through in depth these steps and really how to implement. And by the time that you would be done with the workshop, you would be developing your own plan. So the first is, identifying your needs, your long-range strategic plan, identifying your funding, then going into that 5-year plan, which is, dedicated projects, annual capital budget, and then implementing the projects and programs. And it's always kind of going back to make sure that those implemented projects have met the needs. So it's a cyclical process. Seems very simplified here, and it is very simplified here. But that's where our workshops and technical assistance go into greater detail. So we do have, speaking of those workshops and technical assistance, if you do have interest in this, then you can contact your Ohio Federal Highway office, and or Ohio DOT. There's a Everyday Counts champion at both the state DOT and the Federal Highway Division, and I should have looked those people's names up before I got on.
That's okay. I can tell you who they are.
It's perfect.
Eric Ross with the Ohio FHWA Division and Tim McDonald with ODOT. And I wanted to add that we actually had a stick meeting last week, and that we're going to hopefully have more information out to everyone soon about how the $100,000 opportunity for the stick incentive will be handled this year here in Ohio.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. See, very helpful already. I appreciate that so much. We also have this accelerated innovation deployment demonstration. That's up to $1 million per year, and that's to deploy an innovation that's not routinely used. And so that could be, Okay,
I'm not sure what happened there.
I don't know either.
That's okay. Well, we can still hear you, so.
My lovely technical. Okay, I keep hitting.
We can still see your desktop. I think you just need to click on it. There you go. You're good.
Okay. Perfect. So this is my last slide, but it is an important slide, and you do have the PDF download. So Ty Bishop and Stefan Natsky are the co-leads on this initiative. You are more than welcome to contact me or anyone on our team. We have a really great team. It's very diverse. We have a local programs officer. We have a couple of state DOT representatives, actually 3. We have DC DOT, Virginia DOT, and South Dakota DOT that are representative on our implementation team, and we meet every other week to discuss initiatives or any interest. We have a lot coming out. We've got an overview of value capture, and then we'll bring in one of our peers to speak, and that will be this whole webinar series. And on the initial Everyday Counts website, you'll see links to those webinars. And then that will start in May or June. And then every month after that, we will go into great depth for each of the techniques and have peers that will be guest speakers talking in depth about their project. We're also going to do a tribal example as well. We're going to have an even more in-depth local example based off this one, and then a larger municipal example as well. So you're going to be inundated with value capture information. But we're also working on a frequently asked questions, and we're updating our fact sheet too. So
that's great. Well, we haven't had any questions in the chat pod yet, so maybe everybody just wants to ask them via the audio. So I'm going to go ahead and start unmuting folks so you can ask your questions via the audio. And I'll just caution you that if you've got a party going on, like in the background, like sometimes happens here in my office, you might want to just ask them to hold it down a little bit. But I'll go through now and unmute everyone. And once I'm finished, I'll let everybody know that I've completed unmuting them. Yes, Thomas, there will be a copy of the PowerPoint slides provided to everyone after the webinar is completed. I'll be emailing those out. And if anybody else still wants to ask a question in the chat pod, you're welcome to ask it there as well. Big group
and
today.
We do have a really great group on our value capture team. We've got several people that work in realty, environment, freight, local programs, planning.
Everybody's been unmuted now. Sorry to interrupt. So
no problem.
If they would like to ask an audio question, they're welcome to. Oh, well, now they're typing a message into the chat pod. Who are the key people in Ohio and at what agencies? And Craig, are you asking specifically about each of the value capture techniques? Yeah, okay. You know, we will have to get that information put together for you. I don't know that Jill's prepared to answer that right now, but that's definitely something we can work on and get more information out to you on the Ohio level.
Yeah, and I provided all the sources of all the examples. So if you don't want to wait on me, then all of those websites are listed on the PowerPoint, and it's probably going to be that sort of contact person. There's usually a contact for more information. That will be the main person that's in charge of that.
Okay. Anyone else have questions? You're welcome to ask them on the audio or through the chat pod. Have you felt that this was a good webinar today, good information that you'll be able to take away and use in your work? It's not a rhetorical question. I was just hoping somebody would say yes.
It's a pretty big concept, and honestly, when I was first put on this initiative, this isn't an area that I normally work with in planning. So at this point, we realize that there's got to be a lot more just education on all these different things, because I hadn't heard of a lot of these techniques. But now when I go out to certification reviews, and in those metropolitan planning organizations, they're actually like, wait, what is this? And they have a big project in mind. They can't put it in their long-range plan, but they're still having a hard time conveying to the public that yes, this is on our radar, but we just can't find some way to fund it. But this could provide, some techniques, to fund those major projects. So,
well, Jill, we definitely are going to look forward to those additional webinars you guys are putting together that will be more of a deeper dive into each one of these areas. So, and we did get affirmation from one person that said, yes, this was helpful.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Good. All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I don't want to keep people on the webinar since we've come to the end of the information for today. But thank you again so much, Jill, for taking the time to make this presentation for us here in Ohio. And we definitely look forward to more information and the deeper dive in the future.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you all. I really appreciate you all being on today. And don't hesitate if you have any questions. You can contact Ty, Stefan, myself, anyone on our team, and we're happy to get back to you.
Perfect. Thanks again. All right. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.